Olá, my name is Gavin, and for the last 4 years I've been learning Portuguese from my Spanish knowledge, so building upon that existing knowledge base. And last week, however, I went to the Dominican Republic, and so I had the opportunity to go back to using Spanish after having focused mostly on Portuguese for the last several years, especially. And there were there were a bunch of different things that I had to remember when I was switching between the two. But the tiny differences were actually the ones that gave me the biggest problem. So the main vocab or the words you have to remember are going to be different between the languages, like falar instead of hablar, Portuguese to Spanish, or like todavía in Spanish instead of ainda in Portuguese. Those were fine. The things that gave me trouble were some pronunciation issues and little word issues, and I kept getting told I had a Portuguese accent because of them, and I wanted to share those with you really quickly. The first was the L's at end of words. So, like Brasil in Spanish, Brasil, papel, azul. I had the tendency to pronounce those as W's. When you're learning Portuguese, you just kind of learn that and you don't even think that think about doing it. So Brasil, azul, papel. And I kept doing that, and that was a hard habit to shake. Secondly, in words that end in UE, especially like que or porque, that's an E sound in Portuguese. So porqui, que é, o que é. And that was another hard one to shake as well. Have to keep remembering that in Spanish it's a, e, I, o, u, and nothing more vowel sound wise, save for some diphthongs. But in Portuguese, of course, you have, I think, 16 different ways that you can pronounce all these vowels. So I had to keep remembering, okay, it's que, porque. Third, the O's at the end of words in Portuguese being pronounced like you. That kept cropping up in Spanish. So words like como versus como in Spanish, or eu espero que sim in Portuguese versus yo espero que sí. And again, it's que sí, not que sim. And that was another issue for sure. Small issues, right? Not big word problems or complete lack of being able to talk. It's the little switches that you forget to switch when you're going back to Spanish. And then finally, the three little words that I noticed that were that kind of cropped up the most in my Spanish from Portuguese were, first of all, one of my favorites is the over there word in Portuguese, lá, vamos lá. And in Spanish, that's allá, allá. You need to remember to add that I at the beginning, and by the time I'd usually said la, it was too late. The difference between the word for but between the two languages. So it's pero in Spanish, pero, but mais in Portuguese. Mais, depends on where you go. And I would find myself, talking, describing something and adding, mais eu fui, and then, completely going into Portuguese because I'd triggered that with the mais. So remember, pero for but. It's such a quick word to say that you forget that you're even saying it wrong or that you're about to say it wrong. And then finally, at the ends of sentences or phrases, when you add in Spanish or Portuguese, you add the no in Spanish or the ne, which is short for no, of course, in Portuguese. I'd keep saying like, se sirve vino aquí, ne? And that's a completely Brazilian thing to do as well. And another thing I got called out on. So remember, if you're going to say that at all, it's a no. So I hope this little, anecdotal lesson has been helpful. I hope to be back pretty soon with back to some Portuguese grammar lessons or something like that. Top 10 grammar tips is, I think, what I'm going to be working on. So until then, ciao.